Welcome back to the channel, and for today's video, we have a very important topic to discuss.
Downswings suck, and unfortunately every player goes through them, especially Phil Hellmuth.
I know, pretty funny, Alex.
So my goal today is to give you guys 5 tips on how to deal with the downswing in poker. Let's dive in.
The first tip on how to deal with the downswing in poker is to simply just take a break. It sounds so simple, but when you're in the middle of a downswing, it's easy to try and play ridiculous hours and chase your losses to try to get it all back at once. But it's absolutely essential to take time away from the felt and do something fun to clear your mind. My go-to is usually golfing with friends and hanging out with family, but you gotta find out what works best for you. Whatever it is, just do it.
Just do it! Yes, you can!
Tip number 2 is to analyze your hands. In order to do this successfully, you need to find a player or group of players that are just simply better than you at poker. Whether that's with a buddy from your local card room or joining a Discord channel like mine where we go over hand histories, you simply just need accountability. It's pretty easy to say that you're losing because of variance, and way too many people use it as an excuse. When you actually analyze your hands with other players, you'll realize how many mistakes you're making in the midst of a downswing, and it's vital to remember that you won't always have your A game because poker is a game of ups and downs.
Sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit.
Tip number 3 is to move down in stakes. If you're playing 1-3 or 2-5 and things aren't going well, check your ego and drop down to 1-2 for a bit. I've personally done this several times in my online poker career. Before moving up in stakes, I always recommend having at least 20 buy-ins, and if you ever fall below 10 buy-ins, that's when it's time to drop. So when I started at 50 no limit, I had a $1,000 bankroll, and then I went on a $500 downswing. Instead of trying to chase my losses and go broke, I dropped down to 25 no limit to build it back up. The players were a lot softer, and I got that $500 back up to $1,000 in just a month, and the rest is history. Discipline is a key factor to winning at poker, and you have to have it to be successful.
You kids are soft. You lack discipline.
Tip number 4 is to tighten up your pre-flop range. When things are going well and you're on an upswing, your confidence is at an all-time high, and it's easy to play more hands because it feels like you could do no wrong. But once that upswing slows down and turns into a downswing, the best thing you could do is tighten up your pre-flop range, lower your bluffing frequency, and stop making crazy hero calls for a bit. Just play some good old boring ABC poker and let things settle back in. Once your confidence is back up, get back to your winning ways.
I think I got my swagger back.
And for my last tip of the day, even though I could probably write a book on this entire topic, is to book a win while playing shorter sessions. When you're constantly losing, it's natural to try and recover all your losses at once, but if you're in the thick of a downswing, booking a win is huge for your confidence. Trust me.
Big trust. Woo woo.
There's been way too many times I've been up a hefty amount early on in a poker session, and instead of booking the win right then and there and walking out a winner, I tried to go for gold and actually ended up booking a loss. These losses are absolutely devastating when you're on a downswing, so do yourself a favor and book the win to get you back in the groove. So those are my 5 tips on how to deal with the downswing, and if you have any tips or crazy downswing stories, drop them in the comments. Before we get into today's vlog, I just want to let you guys know that every Monday at 8:30 p.m. Pacific time, I host a meetup game on the Club GG app. I give away $50 to the highest stack at the end of the night and $25 to the player with the highest VPIP. To get started, click the Club GG link in the description, and in order to join the meetup game craziness, make sure to use my reference code. And speaking of downswings, we're in the midst of a $2,500 downswing, so let's see if we could pull ourselves out of it. After our week-long Lake Tahoe getaway, we're happy to be back at Capital Casino, located in the heart of Sacramento. We buy in for our usual $500 starting stack, and after folding our first hand of the day in the hideous King 4 offsuit, we don't waste any time before getting in on the action. In our second hand of the day, there's one limp in early position, and I look down at 10-9 of clubs and raise it up to $20. Only the small blind puts in the call, so with $40 in the pot, we go heads up in position to an 8-7 deuce rainbow flop. With 2 overs and an open-ended straight draw, After the small blind checks, I throw out a half pot bet of $20 and he puts in the call. He could have some floats with some big overcards, but he probably has some type of small pair. So the pot has doubled to $80 and the turn comes out the king of hearts. He checks again, and even though this card doesn't do anything for my specific holding, it's the perfect scare card to represent if our opponent does have a small pair. So I keep the aggression going and bomb it with a $75 bet. He folds faster than me running to the toilet after eating Taco Bell, and we scoop in a nice little pot with 10 high. Next hand up, there's one limp from under the gun, and I raise Queen 10 offsuit to $20 from the button. Just the limper puts in the call, and the flop comes out Ace-6-5 with 2 spades, and he starts off with a check. Not too sure if I should be bluffing in this spot, but under the gun limps are usually Ace-X hands or small pocket pairs, so I'm going to implement the old one and done bluff strategy. If I get called, I'll just give up, and if he folds, well, that'd be awesome. So I throw out a $20 bet, hoping for a fold, but our opponent snap calls. The turn comes out the 7 of clubs, and after our opponent checks again, it's time to abort mission. I check it back, and the river goes check, check on the 8 of spades. Our opponent wins after turning over Ace-6 offsuit for 2 pair, and after this hand, I discovered that this player loves playing a ton of hands, so keep that in mind going forward because we're going to get in some major battles throughout the day. After missing with the 49er hand, we decide to add on $500 and unload the clip completely because this game is playing huge today. So we're already into the game for $1,000 total. Shocker, I know. The $7 straddle is on, and I'm in the cutoff and look down at pocket nines and bump up the price of poker to $25. Only the straddler calls, who is the same player from the Ace-6 hand, and with $50 in the middle, the flop comes out 7-6 deuce rainbow, giving us an overpair. He checks in flow, and I throw out a value bet for $30. Our opponent wastes no time before putting in the call, and the turn comes out the ace of hearts. He checks again, and this is a pretty terrible card for us. It could give our opponent some type of 2 pair, but what makes it an even worse card is if our opponent had a small pair, I highly doubt he's calling a bet. So I check it back for some pot control, and the river comes out the 4 of diamonds. Not the biggest fan of this card because it completes some 2 pairs and straights, so I decide to check it back. Our opponent turns over 10-7 offsuit for flop top pair, but unfortunately for him, that does not beat our pocket nines, and we scoop in a small one. I guess I could have bet small on the river, and he might have called, but
the world may never know.
We're back above the even mark, and for this hand, we're playing the local famous Capital Casino bomb pot, but for only $10 this time. 8 people join the party, so there's $75 in the pot after the rake, and we get dealt the ladies' pocket queens. We go straight to a flop of King Jack Jack with 2 spades. Not the best flop for queens in an 8-way bomb pot against players holding any 2 cards, so when it checks to me, I decide to check as well, and surprisingly, it gets checked around. Turn comes out the 6 of diamonds, and action gets checked to me again. No one seems to have any interest in this pot, so I decide to throw out a $30 value bet to charge hands like Queen 10, small pairs, and flush draws, and just the button, who's the same opponent as last hand, puts in the call. There's now $135 in the middle, and we're going heads up to a river, which comes out the 8 of clubs. I don't think I could get called by worse at this point, so I decide to check it over to him, hoping he checks it back. But instead, our opponent throws out a pretty big bet of $80, and now I have a decision. Let's break it down. Our opponent is on the button, and he didn't c-bet the flop on a pretty connected board, so he probably doesn't have a king. He only called our turn bet, and I would figure a jack would raise us for value, and a non-spade 8 on the river shouldn't really change much. So with all that going through my head, we have ourselves a clear snap call. I put in the chips, and our opponent turns over 10 deuce of spades for the missed flush draw, and we scoop in a solid pot. Next hand to note, there's 3 limps to me, and I look down at pocket 6s on the button. I could obviously just limp along with a little $3 bet, but I'd just be set mining at this point, and I'm tired of playing passive. Time to play some aggressive poker, especially in position. So I raise it up to $30, hoping to get folds or just one caller, and that's exactly what we get when the player from every other hand puts in the call. We've got $65 in the middle, and the flop comes out 10-6-5 with 2 diamonds, giving us middle set. He checks it over to me, and this is the type of board that crushes his range, so it's time to get some value. I throw out a $35 value bet, and our rival of the day quickly puts in the call. The turn comes out my second favorite card in the deck, and the 5 of clubs, giving us a full house. Our opponent checks it over to us again, and my natural instinct was to check it back since we were almost guaranteed to have the winner, but I think checking would be a huge mistake. We'd lose value from his flush and straight draws, and if he had a 10 and a scare card comes on the river, we'd definitely lose value. So given all of that, I throw out a small bet of $55, and instead of calling, our opponent decides to jam all in, which is music to our ears. I snap call and turn over the bad news, and he says that he has a 10. After the river comes out a blank ace, he mucks his cards and we scoop in an amazing pot. We're up about $400 at this point in the session, and since I'm on a downswing, I would implement tip number 5 to book a win while playing a short session, but I'm technically a content creator now, so I need some more footage for a sufficient video for you guys. So we're here for the long haul. For this hand, we open Queen 10 of Hearts to $15, and we know we're back at Capital Casino because we get 3 callers. $60 in the pot, the flop comes out Ace 7-3 Rainbow. There's no way I'm bluffing into 3 people on this board, so when they check it over to me, I decide to check it back. Turn comes out the 6 of Hearts, giving us a flush draw now, and now the big blind leads out for $37. Folds to me, and it's easy to tell yourself that it's only $37 to call, and if we hit the flush, we'll get paid, but it's important to calculate the pot odds. After doing so, you'll realize that this isn't a profitable call, and it's important to keep good strategy in a downswing because we don't want to compound our losses. So I toss it in the muck, and we move on. $6 straddle is on, and one person puts in the call. I look down at King Jack of Hearts and raise it up to $30, and we once again get 3 callers. Flop comes out King 9 Deuce Rainbow, which is drier than the Sahara Desert. When they check it over to me, I throw out a 1/3 size bet of $40, but they all fold.
Thank you.
In the literal next hand, we get out King Jack again, but in the spades variety this time. The $7 straddle is on, and I raise it up to $20. Both the small blind and big blind put in the call, but now the straddler goes all in for $47. This is the same player from all the previous hands, so we know our hand is probably good the majority of the time. So I decided to raise it up to $120 since there's already $107 of dead money out there, and I'd rather battle against one hand than 3 hands to try and win the pot. The other 2 players get out of the way, and I turn over my hand like I always do when I'm all in, and the flop comes out Queen Jack 6 with 2 spades, giving us a solid middle pair along with the flush draw. No complaints here, especially when our opponent says that it was a terrible flop for him. Turn comes out the 4 of diamonds, and the river is the 10 of clubs, which I hate more than everyone else hates my voice. Can't blame you. Our opponent turns over King 9 of Hearts for the straight, and that one hurt because we were a 93% favorite going to the river. Oof. But no worries here because you can't control that, and it was just a little pot. We move on, and the $6 straddle is on once again, which we love to see. 2 people put in the call, and we look down at King Queen of Clubs and raise it up to $25. 3 people put in the call of the $25, and we're going to a flop 4 ways with $100 in the middle, and the flop comes out King Jack 10 Rainbow, giving ourselves top pair and a straight draw. They check it over to me, and I would usually bet in this spot, but since we're 4 ways and I only had 1 pair, I wanted to check it back and underrep my hand. This will also allow us to see what our opponents do on the turn. So after seeing the 8 of clubs on the turn, the straddler now leads out for a super small bet of $20, and another early position player puts in the call. Action's back on me, and now I have a decision. Since the straddler bet super small on a very connected board, my read was that both of these players had 1 pair at best. And unless they limped with ace-king, I should probably have them beat. So with all my equity, I decided to implement a super small raise to just $70, looking to get value from some one pair holdings, and surprisingly, they both put in the call. So the pot has ballooned to $310, and my thought was to value bet a 9, ace, club, or king when they check it over to me, and check back any other card. So when the river comes out a complete blank in the 6 of diamonds, my plan was to check it back and take my top pair to showdown, but now the straddler does something I definitely wasn't expecting and leads out for $75. Early position player folds, and now I'm super confused. The 6 really shouldn't change anything, but if our opponent was bluffing, I'd expect him to bluff huge. So this sizing seems super fishy, and that led me to my decision to toss my one pair holding in the muck. Thank goodness I did, because our opponent turns over 9-7 of hearts for the turn straight. I guess he was worried that I had a better straight on the turn, but didn't want to lose value on the river by betting out. I don't really know, but either way, I'm just glad we made the right decision on the river. We look down at ace-9 hearts in early position and open it up to $15. 2 people put in the call, and the flop comes out ace-queen 5 rainbow, giving us a mediocre top pair. Big blind now leads out for $15, and the other player gets out of the way. I think the only play is to just call in this spot, so I stick in the chips. Pot is sitting at $75, and the turn comes out the ace of clubs, giving us trips and putting 2 clubs on the board. The big blind continues the aggression, but just leads out for $15 again. This is 100% a sizing tell, so I'm putting our opponent on a queen or flush draw like jack 10 or king 10 of clubs, trying to set their price. So I need to get some value from those holdings, so I make a super small raise to just $35, but he folds and we scoop in a nice little pot.
Go Bluff.
We get a dealer change, which means we're back for another local famous Capital Casino bomb pot. $15 is finally back on, and 6 people joined the party, so there's $85 in the pot after the drop, and we're in the small blind and look down at 10-8 offsuit. We go straight to a flop of 10-7-6 rainbow, and since I'm first to act with a shitty top pair and a gut shot, I start off with a check and the action gets checked around. Turn comes out the best card in the deck and the 9 of clubs, giving us the straight and putting 2 clubs on the board. I now lead out for $45, hoping to get action from 2 pairs or a flush draw, but everyone folds and we finally have the momentum back on our side.
Very well. Much welcome.
There's 2 limps in early position, and now the hijack raised to just $6, which seemed like a sizing tell. The cutoff now 3 bets to $23, and I look down at ace-queen offsuit in the big blind. In the past, I would just call with this holding and end up having to play a multi-way pot out of position, but I think that was a big leak in my game. So instead of being soft, I decided to raise the price of poker to $100, and one by one, they all fold and we scoop in $35 of dead money.
I can't call it.
2 overs.
This next hand, we get put in quite the spot. Early position, who's been raising a ton of hands but playing post-flop passively, opens to $15 under the gun, and action gets folded all the way to me, and I look down at ace-king offsuit from the big blind. I debated just calling and under-repping my hand, but I decided to throw in the 3-bet to $55, never expecting a fold from an under-the-gun raise, and as expected, he puts in the call. With $110 in the pot, the flop comes out king 6-4 with 2 diamonds, giving us top pair, top kicker. I throw out a value bet of $55, and our opponent goes in the tank for a little bit, but eventually puts in the call. The turn comes out the deuce of clubs, and if I still had the best hand on the flop, then I'd assume I have the best hand still. So I keep the aggression going and throw out a $125 bet, but now our opponent raises to $375. I don't know about you guys, but anytime a passive post-flop player raises you on the turn in a 3-bet pot, when my range consists of all the aces, kings, and ace-king, I just assume I'm almost never good. So I don't waste any time before tossing my hand in the muck. If this was an aggressive player or someone that watches my vlogs, then I'd probably go for it, but against this specific player, I decided to live to see another day.
Are you on lunch?
Well, that one hurt to lose, and now we're only up $120. Early position opens to $15, and this guy is a pure action player. He He loves playing aggressive and opening wide, so when action's folded to me on the button and I look down at Queen Jack of clubs, this is a perfect hand to ISO with and put in the squeeze. So I raised to $50 to try and play a pot heads up with him, and just this opponent puts in the call. With $100 in the middle, the flop comes out Jack 8-7 rainbow, and we have ourselves a decent top pair. He checks it over to me, and I think a bet is in order, so I grab $45 worth of chips, and he puts in the call again. Pot's sitting at $190, and the turn comes out the biggest blank in the deck and the deuce of diamonds. He checks it over to me again, and I figure if I had the best hand on the flop, then this turn shouldn't change anything. So I throw out a value bet of $105, and our opponent calls once again. Since he didn't raise on the turn, I think he has a ton of combo draws like Jack 10, Jack 9, 9-8, 9-7, and you get the picture. So unless we hit a queen, my goal was to check back the river since I didn't think we'd get called by worse. But unfortunately, we don't get that chance when the river comes out the worst card in the deck in the 9 of spades, and our opponent leads out for $200. We have ourselves a complete bluff catcher now, and to be honest, I don't think there's any bluffs on this board. Every hand we mentioned earlier now beats us, so unfortunately for us, we're forced to toss our hand in the muck. We never got to see what our opponent had, but I'm 100% sure we were beat given the run out.
That one's good.
After missing a bomb pot with 6-5 offsuit, we look over at our stack and our worst nightmare just happened because we are officially stuck on the day after being up over $400. And that's why I recommend tip number 5 to play a short session and book a win when you're on a downswing so you can get your confidence back. Because right now, I'm just not feeling too hot. But since we still have a little time on our hands, only one thing to do and just play our hands the best way possible. The $8 straddle is on, and 2 people call the $8. I look down at Queen 10 offsuit from the cutoff, and I usually just fold this hand, but since I'm stuck and these guys have been limping super wide, let's try to play a pot in position. So I raise it up to $30, and we get 3 callers. With $120 in the pot, we see a flop of 10-9 deuce with 2 spades, giving us a solid top pair. They check it over to me, and on this board, we definitely need some protection, so I throw out a value bet of $55, but they all fold one by one, and we scoop in a nice little pot. Our stack is currently sitting at $980, and we are down just 20 measly dollars on the day. And if you've watched any of my videos, you know that we always leave at 2 p.m. because I like to have a good family life balance, and it's 1:58 p.m. on the dot right now. And as you guys know, we are currently on a 2,500 downswing and a 5-session losing streak, so what I'm about to do is definitely not recommended. After looking at the clock, I decided that this was my last hand of the day, and whatever I got dealt in, I was playing no matter what. Figure I could either make a value hand or pull off a sick bluff to snap my losing streak. So we're in the low jack for this hand and see 2 limps in front of us. I look down at 7-6 offsuit, and to be honest, I was expecting some trash like King 4 offsuit, so this hand looks like pocket aces to me. I just called the $3, hoping to see a cheap flop, and the button calls as well. But now the small blind spoils the party and raises to $28. Our opponent in early position puts in the call, and I decide to toss my hand in the muck. Yeah, no shot I was doing that. I'm in there, so I throw in a green chip, and the button gets out of the way. We're going 3 ways to a flop with $90 in the middle, and I can't even make this up because the flop comes out 9-8-5 rainbow, giving us the stone cold nuts. But unfortunately, they check it over to me, but now it's time to build a pot. I decide to go with a 1/3 sizing of $30, and both players put in the call, which we love to see. Pot is doubled to $180, and we're still going 3 ways to a 3 of hearts turn, completing the rainbow. Both opponents check it over to me again, and now it's time to charge all the pairs and draws, so I size up a bit more and go with a half pot bet of $90. Small blind folds right away, but the early position player is definitely not in the folding mood. In fact, he's not even in the calling mood because he decides to go all in for $300 even. I put in the call faster than Kenny dying in a South Park episode, and turn over my hand like I always do when I'm all in. Our opponent turns over his hand, which is ace-9 of clubs, and he's officially drawing dead. River is irrelevant, and we scoop in a massive pot in our last hand of the day with a trash holding. No worries. Well, if I was an asshole, it would have been our last hand of the day, but I'm not trying to get accused of hit and running and get jumped in the parking lot, so we do the old courtesy play and sit down for another 30 minutes. But once that time was up, we pulled out this joint like 50 Cent does in Entourage.
The session started out great, but then went to absolute shit. But then we got lucky with that trash 7-6 hand and got a massive pot pushed our way. In for 1,000 and out for 1,439 for a $439 win. Finally.
So I'm nowhere close to overcoming this massive downswing, but this was a very important win for my confidence. This was our only session of the week since I'm working a lot and getting all the additions to the new house still. So we played a total of 4 hours and 30 minutes of poker this week and won a grand total of $439 for a $97.55 hourly win rate. Just a couple more weeks with all the house craziness, and we'll be looking to play 2 to 3 sessions a week, which I'm super excited for. And as always, I hope you guys run good at the tables, and I'd appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button to help me reach my new year-end goal of 10,000 subscribers.